Do you find Preacher Bingo in your bag? That's a take-home little present you can use when school starts up again. In all your bags, there's Preacher Bingo. An exciting way to interact with your preacher back on campus. Who all has had Brother Jed himself? Oh, okay. All right, not bad. Oh yeah, in the back too. How about Tom Short? Tom Short? Yeah, all right, we got a Tom Short. Tom and I are good buddies. We go way back. Back when I was here at OSU, Tom and I spent a lot of time chatting out on the Oval. Good times, good times. All right, so hopefully people will continue trickling in. So you may notice a theme at this year's conference, and that's that just exactly like Fernando was talking about, we are very interested in going out and doing things, making our humanism relevant to people out in the world. And our next speaker, Buxi Iacobone, has done and is doing exactly that. She has finished her first degree. She's got a geography degree from Ohio University, which, by the way, is totally different from the Ohio State University, but is still super, super awesome. Woohoo! She did that. That's great. Then she decided, after seeing what was going on, and I think we're going to hear a little bit about this tonight, what was going on with women's reproductive health care, that there needed to be more doctors out there who were willing to perform abortions. So Buxi decided to go back to school so she could become exactly that. And Buxi's been involved in all kinds of other atheist activism, and as Tori mentioned earlier this evening, Buxi was a winner of one of our scholarships in the 2015-2016 school year. And that had to do tremendously with a lot of her work that she had done with COUNT, which is the Central Ohio and United Non-Theists. And they are a group of non-believers that dedicates itself to going out and doing all kinds of awesome service in the community. And in addition to that, Buxi's been involved in work with Planned Parenthood. I've been to the State House with her. I know she's presented in front of the Ohio legislature about how idiotic they were being about defunding Planned Parenthood, and that she's also been involved in Black Lives Matter protests and a whole lot of other incredible activism. And that is all spectacular. But what is even more spectacular to me is the title of Buxi's talk, which, if you haven't read yet, is a delightful pun in the cervix of the Lord, which just warms my little atheist heart like you have no idea. Okay, so please join me in welcoming to the stage Buxi Iacobone.
Hello, I couldn't have asked for a better introduction. I'm Buxi, and I'm here to talk with you all this evening. I'm sure you're wondering why I've gathered all of you here today to talk about what it means to work in the cervix of the Lord and to explore some of the intersections between religion, secularism, and reproductive justice. So, a little bit of quick background about me. I'm an Appalachian, Ohio native. I grew up in the only Ohio county with no 4-lane highways, and as a result, no Walmarts or hospitals or modern conveniences of any kind. But in 2013, I moved to Columbus, and I've been here ever since. I'm a patient turned volunteer turned employee at Planned Parenthood. I actually came here today straight from the East Surgical Center, which is one of 2 clinics in Columbus that offers abortion services. And I do want to clarify really quickly, I'm not speaking this evening as a representative of Planned Parenthood, but I do work there, and I absolutely love it. Oh, yeah, cool, thanks. I am a degree holder, but I am back in the classroom thanks to a generous scholarship from SSA. Please donate. And I hope to apply very, very shortly. I'm pushing myself to apply as soon as possible to medical school to pursue a career as a physician, as August detailed. So now that you've gotten to know a little bit about me, I have a question for all of you. I guess I can't move too far. Can you hear me? Take it out. I can take it out? Okay. I'm going to get real personal real fast. Who here has ever lactated before? That is not very many people. That's not very surprising. I've been lactating for about 2 years and change now. And I don't think that that is super out of the ordinary for a 25-year-old woman, but I have never been pregnant. It turns out I have a health issue that, in addition to making me lactate, interferes with my ovulation and down the line could have a serious negative impact on my fertility. And I tell you this to kind of create some context for my personal investment in the issue of reproductive justice. And that investment is also informed by my secular values. So to kind of build a little more of a framework around that before painting the bigger picture, that personal context and that secular context that I'm coming from build in me two convictions that I'm operating from and want to share with you. The first one is that reproductive justice is about access to a full range of options to be in control of our sexual health and our reproductive lives. And the second is that secularism only has utility if it's used to shape a more just world, whatever that may happen to look like. And that's not to say that the only true version of a just world is my version. Of course, there's no doctrine of secularism with sacred tenets, including thou shalt be pro-choice, right? But this is where I'm operating from. And even if you don't share my convictions here as I've listed them exactly, I am pretty confident that there is at least something in them that we can find common ground on. So without further ado, I want to make a rough sketch for you about what access to reproductive services looks like in the US nationally and at the state level. And then I want to see if you notice anything. So nationally, some points in favor of access to reproductive care are that birth control has been officially legal for everyone in the US since 1972. Before that, there were some fuzzy bits around whether you were married and a bunch of funky things, but 1972, we decided that's a right that everyone should have. In 1973, we made the same decision for abortion. I'm sure that many of you have heard about Roe versus Wade. Some of you may have heard about the case Planned Parenthood v. Casey. All of them amounted to say that with some caveats, mostly circling around fetal viability outside of the womb, abortion is a right in the United States. Lastly, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, health insurance is required to cover female contraception without a copay. So, brief review, abortion, legal, birth control, legal, also your insurance has to pay for it. But there are a few catches. So, insurance that's provided by houses of worship is not required to cover contraception. Other religious employers, like religiously affiliated schools or hospitals, if they provide insurance to their employees, that insurance does have to pay for contraception, but your employer doesn't have to pay for that service or make any referrals or lift a finger or be involved in any way. And additionally, federal funds are barred from covering abortion services, except in rare cases, thanks to this curious, ever-renewed piece of legislation known as the Hyde Amendment. So putting these two pieces together, the points in favor and the points against, basically you're entitled to an abortion unless you can't afford it, and you're entitled to contraception unless you're not. At the state level, I have a few examples that we can zoom in and see. Points in favor of access at state levels are that out of the 50 states in the union, 15 provide abortion coverage through their Medicaid plans. I don't think that 15 out of 50 is a great average, but it's better than nothing. 16 states allow non-physicians, such as nurse practitioners, to dispense abortion medications. And just quickly, I don't know if everyone is aware, there are broadly two different kinds of abortion. There's surgical, where the pregnancy is removed from the body via vacuum aspiration or curettage. And then there's medical, where you take a pill or a series of pills, and then they create something that's similar to a miscarriage in the body. And allowing people who are non-physicians, such as nurse practitioners, to dispense those medications is a really big point in favor of access. Lastly, 3 states and DC allow individuals to get birth control from a pharmacist without a doctor's prescription. So you don't have to find a doctor who's taking new patients and call and schedule an appointment and wait for 6 months and go and get a horribly invasive exam just to get this basic kind of care that a lot of people are using safely. However, many states have conscience clauses that often specifically cite religious objection as grounds for medical providers to withhold medical services. And the way that plays out in reality is not that there are dentists who are saying, you know, I'm opposed personally because of my religious convictions to giving fillings, so I'm not going to do it. That's not what it looks like. It ends up affecting reproductive health services to the exclusion of nearly all other kinds of health care. We could talk about euthanasia, but I don't want to. It's mostly repro health. Using Ohio as an example, because that's the landscape I'm most familiar with, our medical board president and our policy director in the Secretary of State's office were both recruited from a religiously affiliated anti-abortion organization. And I don't mean that they volunteered their time there on the weekends and that was a hobby they had before they got these jobs. They were recruited from active leadership positions in this organization to become part of our state's administration. Additionally, and this is kind of fun, there are only 2 states in the union that prohibit sex education in schools from promoting religion. Does anybody have any idea what those states are? One of them is California. No. The other one is Louisiana. Yeah, isn't that pretty cool? So things are a little funky. And I want to see, after presenting that to you, if there's anything that you notice. Do you notice that points in opposition to reproductive health care tend to be religiously rooted? Even when they don't specifically cite religion, which, as you can see in state conscience clauses that allow religious objection, sometimes they do, but even when they don't cite religion, if something involves imposing values that are described as though they're universal but are actually grounded in a specific faith, for example, people who say that access to birth control is no good because it will encourage promiscuous behavior, as though we're all just in agreement that promiscuity is bad and that that didn't come from some kind of outdated religious text. Or if a perspective is based on an understanding of the world that is rooted in religious doctrine but not supported by scientific evidence, like when people say abortion is wrong because life begins at conception, when really there aren't studies and evidence-based methods to support that. When those kinds of pieces of opposition arise, even if they don't make explicit mention of religion or faith, religion is at the root. I don't want to mince words. Religion is the root of virtually all opposition to access to reproductive care. However, though most opposition to reproductive health care and education is religious in nature, most religious faiths are not inherently anti-contraception, anti-education, or anti-abortion. And to kind of zoom out and see the bigger picture, this movement, while it includes what you might call religious zealots who are opposed to access, it also includes people like these women who are part of a demonstration with a group called Catholics for Choice, and they're out to show the world that the majority of Catholic women use birth control regardless of what people at the Vatican think about it. The bigger picture also includes these women, and this photo was taken in Turkey in, I believe, 2013, when the Turkish administration sought to put was essentially a ban on abortion into effect. And though I don't believe that the people who organized the protests were acting from an explicitly religious perspective, it's worth noting that 96 to 99% of the population of Turkey is Muslim. So for there to be enough predominantly Muslim people to come out into the streets and effectively protest against an abortion ban, it worked, by the way. That says to me that at the very least, Islam is not an antonym to reproductive justice. I also want to point out that in Ohio, one of our most prominent All Options Pregnancy Counseling Hotlines is run by an organization called the Ohio Religious Coalition of Reproductive Choice. Who was that? Oh, sorry, I'll find it. Yeah, it's really exciting. I know the woman who runs it, and she is really wonderful. So those are all examples of people acting in favor of access, and they're not doing it despite their faith or in absence of faith. They're doing it within or through their faith. So what do we do with this information as secularists? Now, allow me to propose a concept called nuance, which, as anyone who has ever been on the internet can tell you, is not always abundant in atheist and secular communities. As you consider reproductive justice from a secular perspective, I would recommend considering the following two notions. The first is to be concerned with identifying the precise problem. The problem is not that people have religiously informed beliefs about reproduction. And the problem is not even that people apply those beliefs outwardly to influence the landscape of reproductive access. No, the problem only arises when people do those things in a way that imposes on others' ability to access what science and reality and most people recognize as valid kinds of care and valid ways to live your life. And the second, and I think that this one is a little bit harder to do, is to remember that you always have more in common with other people than you think you do or that you might expect that you do. Many ideological roads cross paths or even share ends, and I can testify to my kind of embarrassing surprise being reminded of this lesson over the summer when I made a friend who is interning with an anti-abortion organization. We were in a program together, and I was introduced as, Miss Planned Parenthood, the abortion fairy, whatever. And I met this young woman. I won't name her or name her organization, but I do think she's very lovely. And I didn't think so at the time when the first words that I heard out of her mouth were, something, something relationship with Jesus, something, something I want to commit my life to ending what she called elective abortion. And this was right after the health center that I work in had been vandalized. And we have protesters every day, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to make eye contact with this girl. We don't have anything to talk about that's going to be at all pleasant. But by the end of the program that we were in together, we ended up having some conversations and ending up in some situations where it was impossible for us not to at least acknowledge each other politely and talk about the weather. And we came to realize that even though we are probably always going to disagree with how to go about making change in the world concerning this one non-negotiable issue that we share, there's something in it that we agree on. And it's going to sound a little bit funky at first, so stay with me. But even though we disagree on how to go about our paths, we both agree that it would be nice if fewer people felt like they needed to have abortions, because let's face it, abortions cost money, and they involve often pokey things in your body and being in stirrups and getting cramps, and that's not fun. So while her concern or her intent to reach that goal might be to make sure that everyone carries their pregnancy to term, where I might be more inclined to say, well, how can we reduce unintended or unhealthy pregnancies? We both agree that there's an outcome hoped for from those modes of thought that's shared. And that was kind of uncomfortable. And it was still uncomfortable when we hugged at the end. But at the very least, when we had that realization about each other, even though we're in stark disagreement and even though we're going to be actively working against each other's interests and against each other's efforts probably for the next several decades, at the very least, we could begin to operate toward each other from a position of respect. And if nothing else, I think that that is a great first step to making the world a more just place.